Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe and explore. The guards saw her first. Just past sunrise, salt haze still clinging to the cliffs, she moved across the loose shale like she knew where pressure points would collapse. No shoes, no pack, no visible injuries. Skin dry and cracked along the shoulders. Hair torn by wind. One hand held low, as though steadying something invisible just beneath her ribs. She walked past two security markers without looking up. Not fast. Not slow. Not lost. The station perimeter had been tripped hours earlier. Cameras caught no one. Gates locked. No inbound ships logged. Nothing came through from land. She reached the south support pylons before anyone intercepted her. 27 seconds passed between first contact and lockdown. During that time, she spoke 3 sentences, each directed to a different technician. One name spoken with perfect pronunciation. Another asked if the vibrational shift had already reached 0.72. The last was a date, said softly, said as if apologizing for knowing it. The date was tomorrow. Inside the control bay, the air hung too still for the fans to explain. A siren had tried to initiate but failed mid-cycle. 2 backup systems registered errors. When questioned, she said it was normal. Just noise before movement. The words settled uneasily, like grit under a lens. One engineer pulled up the regional stress map. No published forecast called for activity. She disagreed. She asked for the seafloor telemetry from the southern trench, time-stamped 23 minutes in the future. Her expression didn't shift while waiting. 3 minutes passed before the reading came through. A harmonic ripple was already forming. Not visible to surface sensors, but beginning to align with prior rupture patterns from 4 years earlier. The compression layer was loading. Quietly. Methodically. Just as she'd said. When asked how she knew, she didn't answer. She turned to the north wall, where a relief map showed elevation faults too old to monitor, and pressed her palm against the highest ridge without explanation. The rupture hit 6 minutes later. Seismic reports placed it at 7.1, centered directly beneath their location, though no structural damage was recorded above. It was as if the earth had folded inward, gritting its teeth without cracking. After containment, she was moved into holding. No ID. No digital trace. Fingertips smoothed by abrasion. Vocal patterns failed to match any database. Bloodwork held anomalies not categorized as foreign, just misaligned. Not in content, in proportion. As if born somewhere calibrated slightly differently. She remained seated for 4 hours. Never asked for water. Never slept. Responded only when prompted. Spoke in full sentences, low volume, minimal inflection. The final thing she said was a request. She asked to speak to the original architect of the foundation pylons. He had died 11 years earlier in a traffic collision. She nodded, quietly, as though she'd already been told. At 3:17 a.m., during a routine sweep, her cell was found empty. Doors locked. Camera feeds intact. No signs of interference. The cot remained undisturbed, except for a single piece of white grit near the center, curved like the edge of a shell, humming so faintly it couldn't be recorded. No one recalled opening the gates. No one remembers her leaving. One officer who'd spoken to her no longer appears in personnel files. His uniform remains in the storage closet, name tag scorched at the edge. No record of fire. The sea had gone calm by morning. Not a breeze. Not a current. Just stillness stretching beyond the visible coast, as if waiting for another step to fall. The sidewalk outside Building 8 never allowed loitering. Not in that district. Not at that hour. Offices emptied before midnight and returned with the tide of morning suits and briefcases, nothing unusual between. Surveillance swept clean every 2 minutes. Street cleaning bots hummed close to curbs. Movement was accounted for. She stood beneath the data firm's logo, shadow cut by the LED ribbon scrolling market summaries no human ever truly read. Bare arms crossed in front. Shoes this time, wrong size, frayed near the toe seams. Eyes followed no one, watched no window, focused instead on a blank patch beside the reinforced entrance. Rain gathered at the edges of her sleeves. Her lips moved once. Not speaking. Rehearsing. Security noted her at 6:31. Badge scanners hadn't logged her entry. She carried nothing. A receptionist remembered her voice as dry, almost mechanical in pacing, not in tone. She asked to speak with whoever maintained automated trading integrity for the East Pacific sector. Not the CEO. Not an analyst. She named a position that had no public title. When denied entry, she gave no protest. Simply stated a list of numbers. 8 digits broken by rhythm, not by language. She warned of a drift. Not a theft, not a hack. Drift. No threat. No consequence. Just impact. Told them to check their anomaly queue timestamps between 11:04 and 11:07. No more. Security approached without hostility. One blink and she was gone from frame. Not vanished, relocated. Cameras captured the movement too late to log transition. A different angle found her 21 floors up, outside a restricted elevator that hadn't operated in months due to system irregularities no one claimed responsibility for. By midday, the building's review board had written the event off. No breach occurred. No data touched. Her face wasn't flagged in any incident protocol. She did not return. On the third morning, Asia's financial index stalled at 842. Not down. Not up. Processing froze. Subsystems forked. Autocorrections failed to commit. Digital noise flooded the market's underlayer, coded patterns that slipped beneath firewall awareness like soot through mesh. Trigger detection reported nothing. Loss estimations began climbing, slow at first, before thresholds collapsed. 400 billion evaporated across platforms. Portfolio liquidations engaged without initiation. Trade bots crossed instructions, cannibalized risk profiles, launched retaliatory orders against shadow listings that didn't officially exist. By 9:09, government kill switches failed to override. Global authorities traced the breach to an arithmetic anomaly sourced from Tokyo's compliance sector. Not a hack. A pattern. Built from legitimate operations, too small for scrutiny, too frequent for oversight. Predictive modeling systems short-circuited chasing the signal. None caught it in time. Building 8's elevator shaft collapsed that evening. No prior instability. No seismic activity. Steel reinforcement failed cleanly. Debris recovered contained a single artifact, a surveillance drone meant to patrol storage levels. Its feed ended 23 minutes before impact. The last frame showed her stepping into the elevator. No alarm. No hesitation. She looked upward. Not at the ceiling. Past it. As if sensing a movement far above the city. Something aligned with timing, not orbit. Something she expected. When reconstruction crews removed rubble, they found no remains. Dust samples matched known building composite. One shard bore partial contact DNA, degraded beyond verification. The firm issued no statement. Executives resigned in silence. Cameras that should have recorded the fall played only static between timestamp. Attempts to scrub the footage further introduced terminal errors into archival servers. By week's end, no one mentioned her again. Not in that building. Not in that city. The market resumed motion with corrected losses reported as technical misfire. No firm accepted responsibility. One cleaning technician, however, recalled a single phrase whispered at ground level, long before collapse. A sentence he didn't understand. He wrote it down on a napkin. Numbers. Same rhythm. Same pause. He never returned to work. The napkin remains locked inside a facility's incident archive no one claims access to. The ink has not faded. The timestamp beside it glows faintly in ultraviolet, repeating once every 91 hours. Humidity clung to walls that no longer dried. The office sat wedged between a shuttered pharmacy and an internet cafe with no functioning signal, its windows stained yellow from years of burnt rain. Missing persons reports filed there rarely closed. Most never reached central archives. Papers stacked faster than budgets could bury them. She entered without hesitation. No appointment. No identification. Not a glance toward the wall of mothers staring out from faded bulletins. The officer behind the counter raised a hand, halfway to signaling her out, before stopping mid-sentence. Not fear. Not recognition. Something closer to disorientation, as if a detail out of frame had changed and hadn't returned to place. A sheet of paper rested between her palms. No folds. No smudges. Typed, but not with any known system font. Ink too sharp for office toner. Names arranged in vertical lines, each followed by coordinates, timestamps, a number in parentheses. 20 total. 19 registered instantly. All unresolved. All active. She said nothing. Not once during processing. Not when fingerprint scans failed. Not when the attending officer asked how she had obtained internal location data only accessible to restricted task forces. Her expression never altered, except when asked to confirm the final entry. That name had no active case. No national match. The number beside it read 0. No timestamp. No notes. 2 weeks passed. Rain cut phone lines, drowned signal towers, erased search parties before they set foot beyond perimeter zones. Still, recoveries followed. Not all intact. Not all above ground. One found beneath concrete layered during a parking expansion 8 years earlier. Another from inside an elevator shaft where no body had decomposed despite 6 months' absence. No search teams were sent. Recovery crews moved alone. Each body rested within 2 meters of the coordinates she had provided. Each bore no signs of struggle. Each had a watch set precisely 7 hours ahead. No statement issued. No arrest made. No further contact. Only silence, until a coroner flagged the 20th name during a routine metadata sync. Not through search. Through anomaly alert. Database logged the name not as missing, but deceased. Filed in São Luís. Time of death set 4 years into the future. Coroner's name listed someone long retired. Signature scanned clean. No edits. No overwrite markers. Paperwork flawless. Except for the date. The office where the document had been filed no longer stood. Burned during a protest. No records saved. No backups survived. That timestamp, however, continues to ping across international registries. No country claims jurisdiction. No agency takes ownership. When flagged, the alert fades within seconds, returning at irregular intervals. No pattern. No source. The officer who received the original list resigned the night of the 19th recovery. No message. No belongings removed. The list remained folded inside a drawer no one opened for 3 weeks. When pulled, the ink appeared smudged in one place. Not erased. Shifted. The last name had moved half a centimeter right. Its number changed from 0 to 1. No one knows what it counts. No further entries have appeared. The room stays locked. Paint peels beneath fluorescent light that no longer shuts off. A damp print appears on the floor every 3rd morning. No footsteps lead to it. No residue explains its shape. Only one feature remains unchanged: the spacing between coordinate. Always aligned. Always silent. Always waiting. The man lived alone, south of Grand Junction, where the roads lost their numbers and fences gave up on holding shape. No listed phone. No mailbox. Only a rusted camper wedged between pines, its antenna bent back by wind that never quite stopped blowing. He hadn't spoken on record in 16 years. Not since the offshore charts stopped matching the waterline. He answered the door without asking who stood behind it. No small talk. No greeting. A look passed across his face like memory dragged unwilling through the throat. The name meant nothing to most. Meant everything to him. She had come to him once, unannounced, 2 winters before retirement. Not during work hours. Not through any channel. He'd found her waiting near his old observatory post, leaning beside a seismograph display set for decommission. eyes fixed on a plot graph nobody used anymore. That night, snowfall crushed signals. Power flickered once, then held. She asked if he remembered lunar harmonic. Not theory. Not tide studies. The old patterns. The buried calibration charts before digitization erased fluctuation margins. He did. Not well. But enough to understand what she meant when she pointed to an old node in the Pacific model and asked, very quietly, when the sky last aligned with that pole. He didn't understand the question. Not then. Not really. She said he would. Soon. Her hands trembled while she spoke, not from cold. From memory. Not memory like an old man has it. Memory with shape. Something she carried like weight against the collarbone. She said it began at night. No news reports. No planetary alarms. No cosmic shift. Just a wrongness. First, shadows lengthened without angle. Light felt stretched. Reflections misbehaved. Children stared longer at puddles. People woke in sweat, unsure why their dreams echoed faces they hadn't met. Days shortened, not in duration but in reach. Midday lost its sharpness. Then the tides stopped listening. Not entirely. Just enough to be noticed by fishermen first. Catch patterns changed. Shorelines grew soft. Sand hardened in places it shouldn't. Seafoam refused to crest on familiar rock. Swells lost rhythm. Migratory paths collapsed. She said the moon didn't crash. Didn't explode. Didn't leave a mark. It faded. No flash. No sound. Not absence. Reduction. As though something had thinned its presence over time, like color washed too often. People didn't panic. Not at first. Because no one wakes screaming when gravity shifts by fractions. They adjust. They explain. They wait for others to speak first. But axis tilt doesn't care about comfort. Drift builds in silence. Months passed. Winds shifted from their historical patterns. Cyclones arrived out of sequence. Drought fell on regions known for flood. Trees failed to bloom. Not died, paused. As if light no longer gave clear instructions. She told him it wasn't climate change. Not in the way governments use the term. It was directional confusion. Earth lost its place in a system that no longer remembered its alignment. The moon had served as a tether. Not symbolic. Not poetic. Functional. Once gone, or diminished, Earth began searching for balance it couldn't define. He asked what caused it. She only lowered her gaze. Replied that it wasn't caused. Just remembered. That's when her voice thinned. As though something in the act of saying it strained her bones. You won't feel the change, she said. Until you do. He didn't know what she meant, but the look she gave him afterward stayed. Something beyond warning. Like someone watching an old film of their own accident. Too late to look away. Too familiar not to weep. She left before dawn. No tracks remained. No logs captured her presence. A storm had blanketed the observatory hours after, but he remembered the exact tone of her last word. Not for how it sounded. For how it silenced everything else around it. He tried to forget. For years. But each morning the sky seemed less certain. Not duller. Not darker. Just slightly out of sync. Weather apps failed to align with windows. Trees began to lean subtly eastward. And his dreams, once shapeless, began to hum with lunar shapes that never quite held form. He no longer tracks tides. No longer keeps charts. But he keeps a nail driven into the wall above his sink. On it, a piece of twine pulled tight across a small brass weight. Each morning, he watches it sway. It moves further from center. Imperceptibly. Enough to know. The moon is still there. But not always. Not everywhere. Some nights it won't rise where it should. And on those nights, no birds call before light returns. A technician flagged the first inconsistency by accident. She had been cataloging deep-sea telemetry from unmanned submersibles stationed off the Norwegian trench. One frame caught her attention, not because of movement, but stillness. A silhouette reflected in the viewport glass. Not a crew member. Not a drone. Human shape, pressed against reinforced interior, where no one should have been. Archived metadata confirmed the sub had been unmanned. Crew logs clean. Access doors sealed. No pressure differential noted. No voice records captured. The figure never blinked. Never shifted weight. Expression neutral. Eyes locked on something beyond the camera's view. Not at the operator. At the lens itself. More surfaced. A pattern emerged across nations. Surveillance footage no one had reviewed began to raise flags during system audit. Emergency exit stairwells, post-disaster inspections, low-resolution scans of assembly meetings closed to non-government personnel. In each, the frame barely changed. Always off-center. Always silent. Never looking at people. Only screens. Screens no one had turned on. One clip, pulled from a restricted maritime safety summit in Busan, showed her seated in the back row. No security record acknowledged entry. No staff recalled her presence. The meeting discussed polar displacement probabilities. Her eyes remained open through the entire broadcast, unblinking for 82 minutes. Military contractors began cross-referencing biometric data pulled from security checkpoints. One flagged a match. Not recent. Not living. A retinal scan from a redacted family relocation file dated 20 years earlier. Name sealed. Case status. Unresolved missing child, Greenlandic territory. Age at disappearance, 9. Analysts ran the scan twice. Same result. Retinal markers don't persist across decades without aging. These hadn't aged. Ratios identical. Corneal vein maps matched point for point. Anomalies in growth trajectory were present, but not in a way that suggested time had passed. More like time had repeated. The location of the original disappearance had suffered glacier collapse months after the report. No trace of the child found. No belongings recovered. What made the file suspicious wasn't the absence. It was the interview transcript from the initial search party. One ranger had noted footprints leading away from the site. Small, barefoot, slightly staggered. As if someone walked against wind that wasn't there. The final sentence recorded in that log read, "Prints end where no edge exists." Upon locating the original report, 2 investigators assigned to verify it experienced separate but identical symptoms within 24 hours. Difficulty with depth perception. Headaches that resisted medication. A subtle sense that their own recorded memories no longer aligned with written statements. They recused themselves without formal explanation. A whistleblower embedded within a low-orbit satellite maintenance division leaked time-stamped visual evidence. Each showed her image reflected faintly in the mirrored underside of signal relays. No equipment could have supported human presence during those time frames. Proximity to solar radiation rendered the orbiting units lethal to exposure within minutes. Yet no environmental distortion suggested camera error. No solar artifact. No bleed. She had not moved in any of them. Just watched. An independent systems engineer ran a forensic sweep on those frames. Data fragments buried in digital grain resembled topographic maps, none matching Earth's known surface. Curves suggested gravity wells inconsistent with lunar pull. Seismic markers coded into what should have been light distortion. No funding body approved further analysis. After the discovery, 2 of the stations that logged her presence underwent silent decommission. Employees reassigned without closure briefings. Assets reclassified. When asked about the anomalies, a spokesperson issued a single sentence. "She was never on our records." They weren't lying. The records no longer exist. Not scrubbed. Not erased. Simply unreachable. Search queries loop back to shell files. Entry logs return static. IDs assigned to no name. Folders with no origin path. But one server, buried in a maintenance subdirectory not meant for public access, stores a single .txt file. Time stamped before the Greenland incident. The file name is a date. The content is one word. Return. Typed 19 times. The last line is empty. Cursor still blinking. A pattern surfaced not through surveillance, but absence. Digital trails once routine began returning blank. Archive requests for naval patrol routes came back corrupted. Not erased. Offset. Dates mismatched to deployments. Coordinates out of range. Logs written in formats no department used. When traced, the metadata pointed to systems never installed. Whole months of maritime records reduced to header files with no payload. A biologist in Helsinki found every record of his correspondence with a research vessel scrubbed from his inbox. Not deleted. Replaced. Messages he'd never written filled the chain, each time-stamped during hours he remembered sleeping. One file embedded a location marker near the South Sandwich Trench. That vessel had sunk 7 years earlier. A forensic team investigating an unsolved hospital incident pulled security footage frame by frame. A burn victim had arrived with no identifying features, no entry log, and no apparent escort. Only later did they notice a figure reflected in the door glass before the crash cart rolled in. Facial match returned no result. Medical staff on duty had no memory of her. One nurse, interviewed off record, admitted she recognized the woman but not from the hospital. She had seen her in a photograph her brother had sent years earlier, a photo he took at a campsite where 3 people vanished during a landslide. The nurse never responded to further inquiries. Her resignation was submitted the next morning with no attached statement. An independent investigative collective, already tracing abnormal recovery sites from closed cold cases, began cross-referencing the visual anomalies. Names, timestamps, recovered footage, all converged around moments that shouldn't exist. Voice memos played with background tones too low for human speech. Spectrogram analysis showed rhythmic patterns beneath ambient noise. Not music. Not voice. Seismic code. Those who interacted with the material for extended periods experienced breaks in continuity. Not mental collapse. Something gentler. They stopped remembering correctly. Forgot sequences. Misnamed their own timestamp. Some denied ever accessing the files. Others disappeared entirely, with no official trace of employment. One journalist followed the path deeper than the rest. His name doesn't appear in agency registries anymore. Articles once attributed to him now list alternate authors. But he was seen, briefly, in Para, near a low-rise complex set between 2 dry canals. He had traced payment receipts to that address. Power bills paid on time. Network pinged once every 42 hours. No outgoing calls. No deliveries. The door was unlocked. No resistance. Inside, no furniture. No clothing. No fixtures. Walls bare. Tiles removed from the bathroom floor. Dust settled in corners like the room had exhaled and never inhaled again. One item remained. A notebook, placed square in the center of the apartment. No creases. No title. First page blank. Second page contained numbers. Handwritten, no smudges, no hesitations. Some circled. Some underlined. A few scratched out. Every page after held diagrams. Tidal tables, latitude overlays, time zone offset. None aligned with current lunar models. Some referenced future date. One sketch outlined a shoreline not found on any existing map. Beneath it, a single phrase. You're standing where the tides will break first. He read it twice. Felt the hairs on his arm rise, not from fear, but memory. Not his own. Someone else's. Something about the way the sentence curled at the end, as if written with a hand familiar with that final curve. He left the notebook untouched. Reported what he could. Within days, his publication pulled the story. Claimed no knowledge of assignment. His press badge failed authentication at every checkpoint. Calls redirected to disconnected lines. Colleagues stated he'd been laid off the previous year. 2 weeks after, a server sweep at the publication uncovered an untagged image in a shared folder. A woman, blurred at the edge, stood before the sea during low tide. Skirt hem lifted by a wind that left no trace on the surrounding brush. In the distance, the horizon tilted by 1/2 degree. Her face remained neutral. One hand hung loose by her side. The other pointed downward, toward a section of sand no longer there. The room held 500 delegates, 70 nations represented. Not one noticed her arrival. She appeared in frame without motion cue, seated in the back left quadrant, beneath a broken ceiling panel no one had remembered reporting. No badge. No credentials. Not one head turned. The live stream kept rolling. The symposium focused on lunar excavation parameters. How deep, how fast, how safe. Projections lined the walls. Mining yields. Orbital decay margins. Tidal resilience models polished for investors. Analysts used language made to reassure. Red zones turned pale orange. Calculations trimmed risk by exclusion. She said nothing for over an hour. Her hands folded across a folder too thin to contain anything real. A technician later noted the folder had no binding. No crease. No paper bulk. Still, she turned a page twice. Each movement spaced evenly apart by 26 minutes. At 11:42, the feed caught her gaze shifting to the camera. Not accidental. Not curious. Purpose etched into the smallest motion. Her lips parted. No sound emerged. Frame-by-frame analysis captured a sequence. 9 digits. Pause. 5 digits. Pause. 1. No one in the room responded. No one recalled her being present. Yet every frame held her. Unmoving. Unblinking. Expression calm, as if rehearsed for someone she'd never meet. A week passed. Then a second. The coordinates were cross-checked by a single marine engineer based in Guam. He filed a confidential notice to his supervisor regarding anomalies near the trench edge. Shifts in pressure without tectonic cause. Minor wave syncopation. Currents that resisted mapping. No one replied. 17 days after the symposium, multiple satellites failed to reorient. Not from impact. Not from loss of control. Their position data no longer matched visual confirmation. Gyroscopes reported alignment. Imaging sensors disagreed. Each device experienced a fractional deviation, too small to detect by standalone systems. Only when overlaid did the deviation reveal a pattern. Earth's gravitational field had stretched. Not globally. Selectively. As if one tether had loosened and a second, unseen one began pulling from another point. Ocean tide models grew erratic. Not chaotic, structured, but alien. Water began rising where wind had not pushed it. Troughs deepened where depth should have been minimal. Animals responded before sensors did. Bird formations collapsed mid-migration. Patterns dissolved. Flocks regrouped in configurations unseen by modern tracking. Some species reversed course entirely, flying into colder zones without feeding. Nesting patterns broke sequence. Time signatures from tagged avians showed them sleeping in shorter cycles. Shoreline gulls began circling open water without descent. Cetaceans breached too early, sometimes miles from traditional surfacing zones. Multiple pods beached across 3 continents within 4 days. Autopsies revealed no trauma. Brains intact. Lungs unruptured. Eyes open. Positioning suggested navigation failure. Or refusal. A naval observation drone caught an orca pod moving toward an underwater ridge marked on no map. Footage showed synchronized rotation. Not aggression. Not disorientation. Movement purposeful. Coordinated by something unseen beneath them. Tide gauges across the Pacific returned mismatched figures. Manual readings contradicted automated logs. Buoys measured elevation gains during periods of apparent recede. Shorelines shrank not from flood, but absence. Water pulled without force, as though invited. Inland weather systems lost coherence. Rain fell in bands too narrow for clouds. Pressure maps lost their symmetry. Time-lapse models stuttered during playback. One observatory noted a shift in moonlight intensity not linked to atmospheric change. Brightness remained constant, but contrast against sky reduced. As if lunar reflection no longer found resistance in distance. The moon stayed where it had always been, but the sky beneath it no longer held shape. She never reappeared after the symposium. Her name remained absent from registration logs. Footage from security feeds caught her entering through a door marked for structural repair. That door no longer exists on the building's blueprint. Inside the projection room, one seat remains cold to infrared scan. Sensors loop during calibration. Staff avoids naming that corner. Every month, a technician replaces the bulb above it, though no request ever gets filed. The old bulbs hum quietly when removed. Not from heat. From something else. During the symposium's rebroadcast, the segment containing her gaze plays clean on external devices. But at timestamp 1 hour 4 minutes and 39 seconds, every monitor dims by 2%, regardless of brightness settings. Her mouth moves again. This time, no one has yet been able to reconstruct the numbers. The video won't pause there. The audio drops out. Only one observer noted something buried deep in the floor vibrations during her second gaze. A low resonance outside human hearing, recorded by accident on a technician's broken microphone. Mapped to pitch, it aligns perfectly with the early phases of a lunar recession curve, one not projected to begin for 600 years. The curve starts at sea level, ends somewhere under the trench she named. Tide forecasts lost their grip first. Not dramatically, just off. Low tide arrived 7 minutes early across 4 monitoring stations. High tide lagged by 11. Most blamed equipment. Salinity shift. Miscalibrated sensors. Error ranges that could be absorbed by margin report. But margins kept expanding. At a harbor in Reykjavik, cargo schedules began to misalign with shore depth. Ship captains reported currents moving counter to wind. Not strong. Subtle. Like the sea was adjusting for something not above it, but beside. Patterns repeated too precisely. Buoys logged pressure rises at identical intervals. Not in minutes. In counts. 81 seconds. Pause. 81 seconds. Pause. A physicist working out of a converted observatory started recording these intervals by hand. He didn't trust automation. Hadn't since a winter blackout erased 5 years of research stored on cloud drives no one could access afterward. He marked the tide charts with a charcoal pencil. Noticed how the same wave crests returned, not just in rhythm, but in shape. Foam patterns. Microcurrents. Swell direction. Identical formations, recurring without variation. He named them memory loops. Not a theory. Not a model. Just an observation. A wave that remembers where it's already broken. He tested the hypothesis with dye released at different entry points. The dye should have scattered uniquely each time. It didn't. It followed the same routes, pooled in the same spots, drifted with the same pull, no matter the delay between releases. Water behaving as if it had already been asked to perform this moment. He isolated the loop to a 22-second window. Any introduction of motion within that frame repeated on next cycle. Movement beyond it fractured. Did not replicate. The ocean, in that stretch, knew what belonged and what didn't. He didn't report the finding through official channels. He uploaded a paper draft to an encrypted server, visible only to those with archived clearance keys long discontinued by international observatories. 12 hours later, he saw her standing outside the lab entrance. No request for entry. No coat. No visible transport nearby. The cameras show her waiting. For nearly 28 minutes. No shift in stance. No sign of fatigue. No evidence of breath in sub-zero air. One frame records her turning to the window. She doesn't knock. Doesn't move closer. Just waits until motion sensors inside the building deactivate. No further footage exists. By morning, the facility no longer stood. No fire warnings were issued. No satellite infrared registered ignition. The shell of the lab smoldered, but no flame had been seen. No smoke trail captured. The metal beams twisted outward. Wind sensors offline. Seismographs melted. Not from temperature. From pressure that left no signature. The physicist was never recovered. His assistant's name disappeared from institutional logs. Their housing records purged. their birth certificates revoked retroactively through a database reset no employee could replicate afterward. The coastline beneath the lab shifted by 1 meter. Not land erosion. The shore itself moved, as though tides had redrawn the boundary line based on preference. Repeat scans showed a new indentation along the rock line shaped like a narrow arc. Almost a crescent. Almost a smile. Only visible when the waves receded on the 81st second of each interval. The moon still hung in the sky. No change visible to the eye. Photographs captured it fine. But its path no longer matched orbital projections. Observatories logged positional drift so small it took weeks to confirm. Each night it passed a fraction late. Each morning, shadows cast by its absence lingered longer across coastal ridges. Not longer in time. Longer in refusal. Light reaching surfaces it wasn't supposed to. Light that had no source. Atomic clocks lost coherence with tidal data. Not by seconds. By fraction drift. Time no longer followed the rhythm it once answered to. Global navigation systems fell into disagreement. Devices recalibrated themselves using star patterns inconsistent with mapped constellations. Software corrected them. Human perception did not. In old notebooks belonging to the physicist, retrieved from a backup hard drive found beneath the floorboards of a demolished faculty office, one page contained a single diagram. A circular waveform intersected by 3 shallow dips, drawn in pencil so faint it nearly erased itself. Beside it, written in a script foreign to the rest of his notes. The ocean is not responding. It's recalling. No name signed beneath. No date. The file attached to the scan refuses to copy. Attempts to print it result in machine errors. But the screen displays it fine. Always clear. Always centered. The lab no longer receives maintenance. That portion of the coastline has been sealed. Not for danger. For disorientation. Visitors report the air feels slightly out of sync with breath. Conversations cut mid-phrase. People forget what they came to see. Except one thing. Everyone who stands there for longer than 2 minutes reports the same detail. The sound of a wave hitting stone behind them. No water visible. No spray. Just the sensation that something is moving toward the shore, again and again, exactly the same way, with no variation. Even when the sea is silent. Even when the tide should be out. The trench had no name on modern charts. Only a designation string embedded in a long decommissioned subnautical archive. Depth readings terminated at 6,000 meters, though seismic echoes suggested a continuation far deeper. Pressure mapping refused to stabilize. Drop probes returned unreadable, not from malfunction but misalignment, like their signals never passed through water. Military divers were briefed without context. Retrieval only. No questions. No samples. Coordinates locked without explanation. They descended in silence, instruments buffered beyond standard tolerances, suits reinforced for something unnamed. At depth, visibility failed within range of torchlight. Not from sediment. From absence. Black not of obstruction, but resistance. The sea did not swallow light. It redirected it. At 1,000 meters above the trench floor, scanners began pulsing in sync with no input. An external signal. Low frequency. Too clean to be random. It repeated every 31 seconds. A rhythm with no drift. A timing foreign to oceanic pulse. Mechanical, but not human. Machine origin ruled out by every technician who later reviewed the readout. Not for what it was, but for what it ignored. It moved through layers that shouldn't allow transmission. No absorption. No scatter. Direct. Intentional. They reached the beacon on day 4. It stood alone on a shale platform the size of a mid-size cargo deck. Not anchored. Resting. Unburied despite current. Surface unmarked by coral or biofilm. As if untouched by time. Metal casing unlike any alloy registered in naval compositions. Cool to contact. Dense beyond expectation. Too dense to lift. The inscriptions were not letters. Glyphs arced in nested formations across the beacon's shell. Not decorative, not symbolic, mathematical. Lunar geometries inverted from known orbital constant. Tidal values reversed. Equations that only made sense when plotted backward. A linguist later identified the structure of the glyphs as closer to calculus than calligraphy. Tidal cycles encoded as recursive feedback, suggesting not a projection, but an ending condition. One set of symbols wrapped around a central ridge, terminating at a recessed chamber no diver could open. Within that chamber, the pulse originated. Measured. Intentional. Irreducible. A countdown. Not labeled. Not labeled as such because countdowns imply direction. This one suggested recurrence, as though the moment it ticked toward had already happened elsewhere, as though this reality had simply arrived at its own echo. Recovery teams brought nothing to the surface. Equipment shorted the moment ascent began. Helmet cams recorded nothing past the final scan. Audio caught the pulse one last time, just as it shifted pitch. Only slightly. Enough to denote that the beacon had registered being seen. No one speaks of the mission. Crew rotation records redacted. Vessel logs sealed. The footage exists in 3 frames preserved across a cold storage server accessible only through analog decrypt. Each frame shows the beacon alone, untouched. In the final frame, a shape appears behind it. No detail. No limbs. Just outline. Tall. Thin. Curved in proportion too precise to call human. Position unchanged across timestamp. In the weeks after, the moon failed to rise over 11 cities. Not on the same night. Not in sequence. Just absent. Sky clear. Stars visible. No obscuration. No partial cover. Weather reports clean. Lunar predictions unchanged. But it was not there. Photographs taken during those absences show stars where the moon should have occluded. No visual distortion. No lens artifact. Timestamp. Verified. Officially unexplained. In those cities, tides lagged by 43 seconds. Water arrived out of rhythm. Not catastrophic, but consistent. Every impacted coastline showed identical delay. Gravitational models failed to replicate the behavior. Local animals exhibited symptoms of confusion. Navigation routes shifted in migratory birds by precisely 2 degrees eastward. She never resurfaced. No body recovered. No signal traced. The last known record comes from a ferry crossing between Kalundborg and Aarhus. Rain blurred the deck cameras. One frame caught her near the rails. Eyes not on water. Not on shore. But turned to the overcast above. Mouth moved once. Audio filter caught her words. I didn't come to change it. I came because I remembered how it ends. She turned her back to the sea. Walked beyond the camera's angle. No second frame captured her departure. No boarding pass registered. Ferry manifests list her name, though no one recalls checking her in. That route no longer runs. Officially due to cost. But locals say the water changed. Noises heard at night. Depths colder than they should be. Currents no longer follow shore. No storms recorded. But every so often, the tide retreats without wind. Longer than usual. Farther. Like something beneath is pulling, not with force, but familiarity. Like it has done this before. Like it always remembers. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.